This video, we're going to talk about 7.2 Objective 5, where we interpret correlations involving group data. The following table shows the average January high temperatures and the average July high temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit for 10 major cities around the world. Complete parts A and B. So construct a scatter plot for the data. Estimate or compute the correlation coefficient. Based on the correlation coefficient, would you conclude that January and July temperatures are correlated for these cities, and explain? So my data is down here, stat edit, and I'm going to put the January high temperatures in L1. And notice that the January temperatures in the southern hemisphere are high because it's summer for them. The January temperatures in the northern hemisphere are low because it's cold for them. And then they're going to switch position, where things in the northern hemisphere are actually going to be warmer in July, and temperatures in the southern hemisphere are going to be colder in July. All right. So all that makes sense to me so far with what we're seeing with the data. So let's go to stat plot, turn our plots on, and plot L1 versus L2. And we want to zoom 9, and let's make our window go from 10 to 90, and our scale needs to be by tens, I believe. And then from 40 to 100, and our scale needs to be by tens again, I believe. And so that looks mostly like A, where we have a close grouping together down here that you can see over here on my calculator. And then this grouping here you can see up here. And those temperatures that are grouped together kind of represent northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere temperatures. Let's go ahead and calculate the R value. Stat calc number 4, L1, L2. Let's go ahead and put my regression equation in here, and we'll calculate. R is going to be a negative 0.873. Based off of this correlation coefficient, would you conclude that January and July temperatures are correlated for these cities? There appears to be a strong negative correlation between the variables, because the correlation coefficient is close to -1. These are going to be fill in the blanks here in just a second. Strong negative, close to -1. Note that the first 5 cities in the table are in the northern hemisphere and the last 5 are in the southern hemisphere. How does this change your view of the correlation? Would you now conclude that January and July temperatures are correlated for these cities, and explain? there does not appear to be any correlation. Once we consider that point, the correlation in part A is due to the fact that summer and winter are reversed in the northern and southern hemispheres, which is what I was talking about as we were going through the data. Okay, let's go ahead and let's look at number 2. The figure shows the birth and death rates for different countries measured in births and deaths per 1,000 people, complete parts A through C. So we already have the scatter plot here. The correlation coefficient is about what? So I'm just going to roughly estimate this here and say that it's a strong positive correlation, but it's not perfect. I'm going to say that it's probably this option of 0.8. It's a strong positive correlation. Now consider this additional fact. The data consists of two distinct groups, one made up of relatively wealthy countries and one made up of very low income countries. Make a reasonable guess as to which data points represent each group and explain your reasoning. So we would assume that the lower income countries had higher death rates. We would just assume that. So we would probably think that this group here was probably higher income countries, and this group here was probably lower income countries. We'll just take a guess at that. So wealthier countries, let's see, the points to the left correspond with relatively wealthy countries, which have low birth rates and low death rates. The points towards the right correspond to relatively low income countries, which tend to have high birth rates and high death rates. The reason they have high birth rates is they keep trying to have more and more kids since they know that it's so likely so many of their kids are going to die, and they need to make sure that they have a next generation. So they just are it's reasonable for them to try and have more and more and more kids, knowing that there's a lower percentage of their kids that are going to survive. So assuming that your guess about the groups in part B is correct, as there appear to be a correlation within the groups and explain. So we would see that if this is a group down here, that the wealthier countries should have a negative correlation, and the poor nations should have a positive correlation. So wealthier countries have a negative correlation. So higher birth rates are associated with lower death rates. Lower income countries have a positive correlation. So higher birth rates are associated with higher death rates. Let me just fill in the blanks here. So blank 3 was wealthy, 4 was low, blank 5 was low, blank 6 was low income, 7 was high, 8 was high, 9 was negative, 10 was lower, and then this is positive and higher. And that's it for this video. We'll come back next time and we'll talk about 7.3 Objective 1. See you for the next video.